We have quorum and...
You actually do have quorum. Ann has joined us virtually.
Oh, yes, we do. Very good. Thank you. In that case, welcome everybody to the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee meeting. We're going to get started. And yes, it's worth pointing out that we have 4 members in chambers. We have 2 members virtually. And I guess I'm not sure it pays to make the distinction at this point. So we're good. We have the whole committee here, and we have quorum, and everyone's ready to here, and we can vote later. Okay, so we have some work to do today. And before we dive in, I want to mention the things that I am aware of that we need to resolve today. Okay, so this is just like the table of contents, and to know what it is we're going to cover today. We are going to, in just a few minutes, take up the question of an application from the town of Dryden that was apparently sent to the consultants and apparently never received by the consultants. And we have to make a decision about how we're going to deal with that, what I'm calling a conundrum. We are going to get a little explanation from our consultants, MRB Group, later, to just a quick explanation or re-explanation of how the process worked in terms of the data sheet. I'm calling it a merge. Other people have had different names for it. I think we know what we mean, but if not, we'll clarify that too. So I just want to make sure that that's all explained again at this meeting so that people understand. At some point, we're going to need to talk about the seeker resolutions. Some of these projects, if they were funded, would require a seeker review, and we have to handle them a little differently. And so I'm actually slightly fuzzy on this myself. Our clerks are going to keep us in line, our attorney's going to keep us in line, and we're going to make sure that we handle those parts of it correctly. We probably will have to make a decision on what we might call the last application or the cutoff application. And what this means is at some point we're going to draw a line. There's already been a line drawn that we can accept or not or modify in terms of all these applications are in and the other ones are out. But when we do that, there's going to be some amount of money left over, and we have to decide what we want to do with that amount of money. Do we want to apply it to the last application? Do we want to not apply it to anything? There may be other options. So that's a question we'll have to work on as we work through this today. And then, yeah, I guess I'll just say this. There was something that I did not check properly, and there's a little bit of an error between what appears in our resolution and the merged spreadsheet that came out. So we don't have to get to it right now, but in the packet, there's a list of applications that seemed like they would have come out of the merged spreadsheet. However, the last 3 actually were not. They did not fall under the amount of money we had available. So I'll just name them so you all make sure we're all on the same page here. I'm on packet page 36, by the way. The Unity House application, the Smart Start application, and the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce Foundation application at this time do not fall in the line that we have drawn. And again, we can redraw that line today, but it appeared in the resolution that they had made it to the final cut, and at this moment they have not made it to the final cut. So let me ask, are there any questions about that particular thing that I just said? Because I know that's brand new news to everybody.
Can you repeat those again?
Sure thing. So I'm on packet page 36, and the last 3 applications listed there, Unity House, Smart Start, and Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce Foundation, are not in what I would call the current list. And again, we haven't approved that list, but the one that came from our consultant. So I made an error in not triple checking things, and so I'm sorry about that. And we might vote today to change that, but as of this moment, those 3 are not on the list. Michael, I see your hand's up.
Yeah, just a clarification, Dan. I believe that those 3 applications are in fact Unity House, Smart Start, and then Cuba International, based on the spreadsheet I'm looking at.
Give me a moment. Tompkins, yeah. I see what you're saying. Tompkins, Cuba, and Smart Start. Well, that's interesting too because I'm reading directly from our resolution.
Which didn't include Cuba.
It didn't include Cuba, so.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, no, so
Okay.
you're right and I'm right. We're both right on this one. Neither one, they're not on the list. They're not on the.
Can I just clear?
Sure,
The
Nora.
only reason, and so Cuba is one of the ones that needs seeker. So if it were to be considered, it would have to have a separate resolution.
So it's doubly not on the list at the moment. At the moment. Any other questions about that confusing little speech I just gave?
I'm pretty sure the Cuba information for the environmental review is in your agenda packet, though.
Yes, thank you. We do have a seeker resolution
Just
for
want to
Cuba.
make sure that, yeah.
Thank you. And that's going to, yes, thank you. That might come up later in the meeting about whether or not we vote on that seeker, that particular resolution if they don't make it to the final list. If they do, of course, we will vote on it. Anything else? Okay. Then let's dive in. And the first issue that we want to bring up is what I'm calling the Dryden conundrum. And we were made aware of this, I believe it was on Wednesday, so less than a week ago, that Town of Dryden submitted an application and sent it off by email. And they sent it in before the deadline and to the correct person, according to a copy of an email they sent us. Our consultants say they have no record of receiving that, and they have done a multi-level check on their servers to confirm that for themselves internally, that they never received it. So the best that we can say, to the best of our knowledge, that email may have been sent and may have never been received, but we don't actually know what happened. We have no way of verifying it. That's all the information we've been given. So we're going to have to make a decision about how to proceed with that. We've had a policy here of not allowing public comment at this committee meeting, and I have made the decision that we are going to allow the Town of Dryden to speak today if they want. And I've been very clear that what they need to speak about, if they're going to speak, is about the sending of the email and that issue, not about the content of the application. In other words, we're not here to judge the worthiness of their application. We're here to resolve an issue about how to deal with a potentially lost email. So, any questions about that part before we ask the Town of Dryden to speak? Okay, it also seems like we have an audio problem going on. Yeah. Is there anything, let's pause for a second. Is there anything you need us to do, like testing or anything like that? Can you say test, 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 Joan?
Test, test, test.
Lee, could you try that, please?
Test.
Just seems like it's mine.
Mice.
I can move desks if
Oh, Rob's waving. Oh, what is that? Oh, that's balloon.
So again, we'll just pause for a moment to work out a technical glitch here. Okay, test, 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 test. How's that sound? Is that any better? No, it's still there. Rob, should I try switching microphones? Okay, test, test, test.
That-
1, 2, 3.
That's better.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Meeting's over? No, sorry. Okay, so we're back to Dryden. So Town of Dryden, I see Dan Lamb is here. Dan, did you want to speak at all?
I'd love to, thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, good morning, Dan, and good morning, committee members and everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to reflect on the process thus far. The town, of course, has been very excited about this recovery fund and the opportunity it provides for the town. And, we've conveyed that numerous times throughout the last year or so about our interest in applying for this money, and I think that's a matter of public record. Our concern, of course, as was just expressed by Dan, is that our application was submitted. We hired a consultant to prepare our application, a very thorough application, and it was submitted at 2:59 on October 31st. The beautiful thing about email is it provides a timestamp for documents that can be a blessing and a curse sometimes, but in this case, I think it's a blessing that our application is verified in terms of having been submitted. Additionally, we did some forensics and worked with Microsoft Cloud to get a documented email trail and tracing conducted in the last couple of days, and we have documentation from our service that the application was sent to MRB and it was received. So what we can do to prove our intent and our following of the rules on this, I feel like let our county legislators know that we were applying. We let the county administrator know. I brought this up numerous times on our monthly calls that we were interested in this program. So I think the public record shows that we were very interested in applying, and now we have like the computer forensics showing that our application was indeed prepared and submitted on time. And I know this is a novel process. The county's never had an opportunity to distribute close to $7 million. And so I hit to are expected, but at the same time, because it is a sort of a once-off, this is our one opportunity to apply for this sort of funding. And I just, urge you guys to consider a way to fix this so we can be considered in a fair way with this application. I know we're not supposed to lobby about what we're applying for, but our project does meet the intent of the federal statute that was passed in terms of supporting infrastructure for municipal broadband. And that's what our project is. It's to serve 280 people in the county. And we just feel like we meet the intention of this program. And we prepared a thorough application, submitted it on time. I just don't know what else we could have done to qualify for this program, and I just ask for your consideration in this case.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, how to proceed, and I've got a little menu of options that we could do, and there may be other options as well. So we could just do a straight yes or no vote on this application by itself. Remember that any yes votes we do have to come with a price tag to it, too, where we're getting the money from. We could start the entire process again and, go through it so that this application would get an equal weight to all the other ones. We could send this issue to the full legislature, kind of separate it out from the process we're doing today, just keep it separate and let the full legislature debate and vote on how to deal with this issue. So those were three options that I came up with, so let's have some discussion about that, or if there's any other ideas that people have about how we should proceed. Veronica.
Just a question. Are we trying to determine whether to consider this application at all, like whether to consider it appropriately filed? And then if we choose yes, or if I know ideally this would be an objective process, but that seems tricky now. then we would figure out exactly how.
So, yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a solid answer. There is no solid answer. I mean, I think one could vote yes or one could vote no and have a variety of reasons why they're voting yes or no, just like we've been doing all along. So it could be a no, and then that no could mean to you that no, I'm voting no because of the process, or it could mean no, I'm voting no because of the content. We have to vote what to do with this application, so why you make your decision is up to you. Shauna.
Yeah, so I would actually vote no on accepting the application. I've written grants before, and typically 24 hours after I submit the grant, I follow up with a phone call or an email to make sure that it was received, especially if it's a large amount. I think we've also gone through the process. We've been doing this for a very long time, and our spreadsheets have been public. And I also would have made sure to check and make sure that the project was on the spreadsheet. The second reason why I would vote no is that I more than likely would not delegate funding on my spreadsheet personally for this project. So it's twofold for me.
Thank you. Deborah.
Yeah, I think I have a somewhat broader observation to make that was triggered by Dan's remarks and Shauna's. We had a process here where first we called the projects that we thought met priorities, and this project would certainly have met the minimum qualifications. But like Shauna, I would not have allotted funds to this project. And this touches on an issue that, Dan, you're not the only person who's raised this. You know, we've been hearing in the last 24 to 48 hours from several applicants who all say, but my project meets one of the standards for which ARPA was passed. And I want everybody to understand, ARPA's parameters for grants set a limit on what we could support and fund with our monies. But those were just limits. The priorities within those limits are up to us as, you know, committee members to make recommendations and for the full legislature to consider. So, for example, and I think that our scoring sheets, the large spreadsheet that MRB put together that shows how each of us voted, that should definitely be public information. There should be no secret about that. But those votes represented our individual priorities, what we perceived to be unmet needs for services within the county and chronic issues within the county. So, for example, mine were mental health and addiction services, homelessness, childcare, and promoting services and opportunities for marginalized communities within the county. And unfortunately, in my priority list, I wouldn't have voted a large sum of money for broadband. And I'm sorry about that. It's not that it's not a worthwhile project on some objective level, but when you've got $32 million in requests for $6.5 million worth of money, you've got to weigh and balance and understand you're going to have to say no to a lot of worthy projects, and you're going to have to decide what's most important to you, because every penny that you spend on a homelessness project or a mental health project is money that's not available for infrastructure and broadband. And those are just the priorities for the county legislature to determine. So thanks for hearing me out. I mean, I certainly, in the initial culling of these projects, would have said, well, yeah, this one is minimally qualified to go into the final round. But when it got down to actually allocating funds, I would not have funded this. Sorry.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this issue about how to proceed with the Dryden application?
Dan, I think Ann has her hand up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
All right, thanks. There's a band practicing outside, so I hope it's not too loud. My preference would be to take a vote on whether we're going to even consider this application, whether we do it either by the committee. Yeah, I guess I'm leaning towards, I would like to take a vote first, whether we want to consider it by the committee versus talk about the merits of it.
Okay, so if we did that, a yes vote would mean that we're just going to start actually talking about the content, and no vote would mean it's over and done with. Is that what you meant, Ann?
Yes.
Thank you. Sean and Deborah, is that sort of what you meant too, or did you mean something different?
Sounds good.
I'm sorry, Deborah, you're muted.
That's fine. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Veronica Lee, would that process be amenable to you? Go ahead, Veronica.
Yeah, and I was going to say along the lines of what Ann said, I guess I'm not really comfortable with lumping the, no, I wouldn't allocate funding to it, and no, I do not think that it was filed correctly, or I do not think that it was like filed such as to be like appropriate to consider at all into a single vote, because I think like if it, it just seems like it sort of like shortchanges the application on getting, even like getting a vote on its like relative merits on the record and whatnot. If we are saying that like, well, like they sent the email on time, don't know what happened between this server and that's, I don't know. I guess I don't want to mix them up because that seems like an unnecessary, like extra obscuring of the process when people are already complaining about like, not having as much information as they'd like in our consideration of the applications. Even though while I have the mic, I want to thank Deborah for her words there in response to like some of the emails we've been getting, just emphasize that like there are, like Dan said, many applications that are very that are very valuable to the community, that meet all the requirements, that would be great, and yet we'll get no funding because if we tried to make that not happen at all, like it's just not possible within this program because we only have $6.5 million. It sounds like a lot until you're looking at hundreds of applications.
Dan, I see your hand up, but I'm not sure, unless you have some new information to add about the sending or receiving of this email, I'm not going to recognize you. Okay.
That is what I wanted to respond to.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, the idea that we would have responded sooner, I guess that's what I heard from Shauna, that we should have noticed this sooner. And I think the process that you guys are engaged in is flying under the radar for a lot of people in terms of how it's being covered. And I just heard from someone else that the grants were listed, and that's what prompted me to look and verify that that our project was included. I guess we just assumed Jason and I have full-time jobs, and we don't, monitor this stuff as a full-time job. We got our application in, we hit send, and it would have been great if we noticed the next day, but to say we should have called, I think it's not a real fair thing to say. We should have verified that our application was sent.
Okay.
I just ask you to consider that, and we got on this as soon as we noticed at the end of November,
Thank you, Dan. We've got your message loud and clear. Thank you. So it seemed to me like the consensus of the committee was that we're about to take a vote, and that vote is, should we debate the Dryden application? And a yes vote means we will then discuss the content. A no vote means it is eliminated. Is that one more time? Is that everyone's understanding? Kathy.
Could we have an actual motion, a mover and seconder?
We will. I just want to make sure we were even agreeing what the motion was going to be. So I think for consistency purposes, since every other motion was made by me and seconded by Lee, I think we might as well do that, if that's acceptable to the. Yep. Okay, so I am going to move that I'm going to put it in the affirmative, that we accept the Dryden application for consideration for possible funding. Does that wording work for people?
I will second that.
Thank you, Lee. Discussion about the motion.
I'm not sure where I will land. I'm kind of in the same boat as Deborah on where the priorities would have been, but I think it's only fair to consider this given that the submission was there.
Thank you.
Keep an open mind here.
Veronica.
At some point, we did say we wanted this process to be open to be accessible, even with folks that don't have a lot of experience applying for grants. No comment on this application personally, but I hear that I don't know what the grant application process is like. I can say that things like, I've done a lot of applying for schools personally, and there it's normal to send your application out, and then it's just like gone into the ether, and you don't receive any feedback of any kind until months later. So it's not obvious to me that one would think to check if one is not maybe operating in that world consistently.
Thank you. Other comments before we vote? Okay, I'm going to go this way. Shauna?
No.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Deborah?
You're muted.
Come back to you, Deborah. Ann?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. Okay, so that does pass. So that just means it's on the table, or whatever the right term might be. So we're going to discuss the merits of or vote on the merits. We haven't discussed a lot of applications in depth. Just so everyone knows, in case you hadn't had a chance to look at this part of it, they are asking for $412,000 to do a part of their broadband build-out, municipal broadband build-out in town of Dryden, and their minimum that they'd asked for was $250,000. I mean, the process we've used for every other one is that we just move it as a resolution and then we debate it and vote. So shall we do it that way?
Sure.
Could I have a moment to pull up the application? I'm sorry.
Yes. Do you know where to find it? It'll be in an email from Town of Dryden.
Well, it'll be in an email from you.
Oh, okay. And I believe it would have been probably Thursday morning, maybe, that you got it. Maybe.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, so again, to follow the same form, I'm going to make the motion, whatever wording we used for all the other resolutions that, but now I'm sorry, I don't have the application number in front of me, but it is the Town of Dryden's application for broadband expansion.
Could you give me just a second on this, Dan?
Sure. Would you be willing to second it first,
Yeah,
just to get on the table? Yep.
yes.
Okay. Shauna, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want clarification. So if a majority wins, we have 4 votes for yes, would this actually open up the spreadsheet completely and we would have to all go back through and fix our numbers? Or, I mean, I'm just wondering what kind of Pandora's box this will open.
Right. I mean, that's a great question. I don't have a solid answer, but here's how I imagine it. We are not yet at the point in the agenda, but we're going to get there, where we move a packet of recommended applications to the full legislature. And when we do that packet, we have to have a dollar figure attached to it. And so that motion is going to have to include how it's all paid for. I guess that's the best answer I can give. Is that too evasive? I don't know. I'm not sure if someone else has a better idea of how to word it or how to think about this. I'm open. Deborah.
I was just going to say, I think that we need to take a vote initially on whether we want to fund this at any level. And if we do, then I guess the spreadsheets are back on the table, because we're all going to have very different ideas of where we want to take however much money we're giving to Dryden away from someone else.
That's right. But remember that that's true about every single other motion that's going to be made later on. That if somebody wants to add or subtract, they have to balance the spreadsheet, or the financial sheet. Veronica.
I would feel okay with doing voting now on, do we want this to be considered for funding at all? Like, I don't know how to word it, but more or less the equivalent of the original culling votes that we did. And then if a majority vote yes, we just note that and hope that somebody does. I mean, I probably would, move it as a motion to allocate some funding to this when we are doing the process of amending the package in the spreadsheet, like you mentioned. Even though its original position on the spreadsheet will be I don't know, kind of nowhere at the bottom, but we can move it from there.
Thank you. It sounds like we're in agreement, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Other discussion?
No, other than I'm looking down the list of the ones that are below the cut line and ones we were not able to get to according to the priorities. I'll vote on it accordingly. It's got to factor that in at this point now.
Yes, that sounds reasonable to me. You have to take everything into account. Other discussion? Okay, let's have a vote then. Lee?
No.
Veronica?
Yes.
Shauna?
No.
Sorry, I was trying to keep track, but I'm a yes. Anne?
Yes.
And Deborah?
No.
I'm sorry, I lost track. What was the count?
3 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay, so that motion does not pass. So as far as I can tell, that is the end of it. Do the committee members agree with me?
Or is a majority?
It only got 3-3, that's what it was.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay then, Dan, thank you for coming to speak with us today.
Thanks for your consideration.
Okay. Next thing I would like to do is ask Michael from the MRB group to talk with us a little bit about, and just explain once again how the most previous step of the process worked, where legislators scored their own sheets and that those sheets were merged. If you could talk a little bit about that process, please, and then if there's anything else you would like to get onto our radar right now, go for it.
Sorry, trying to get myself off mute while I'm trying to share a screen. So I hope that you guys can see my screen right now. Can everyone see it?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So what we did was we pasted in on these columns O through T, we pasted in every committee member's proposed awards. And the spreadsheet automatically color codes them. So if you can see here, anything that's coded in green is a committee member awarded them the full amount of their request. If it's in this yellow color, the committee member awarded them the minimum request. If it's in a white, it was some amount other than the full request or the minimum. And if it's red, the committee member did not propose awarding that application. So you can kind of see at a glance which committee members awarded which amounts to each application. Then if I can direct your attention to column H, this is the number of members who proposed funding. So you can see this first batch at the top are all six committee members all proposed some amount of funding to it. The column right next to it is the amount of funding that those, in this case, 6 committee members chose to award to that particular application. So you can see all the 6s are at the top, and then the 5s, and then the 4s. And then within the 6s, it's the percent funded. So at the top, all 6 members chose to fund it at the full amount. At the bottom of the 6s, on average, about 40%. Next column just shows the count: full, partial, 0. So 6 in this case, 0 partial, and 6 chose to fund it entirely and nothing else. And then I'm going to skip over the next 2 columns, and we're going to go to here to the toggle and the notes. What we had to do is, as consultants, is that we had to then apply a set of rules based on your proposed awards to determine this column, which is funding based on member selections. So the first one is very easy. You all voted for the full award. So we put that as a 1, and you can see there's a little legend right here. So 1 means it's the fully funded. 2 means a minimum fund. And 3 means some other amount. And we averaged the recommendations in that case. So how did we get here? Well, if there were 4 or more positive votes for fully funding, we gave it fully funding. If there were 4 or more positive votes for minimum funding, we gave it minimum funding. In the case where there wasn't a clear majority, but there was a plurality or the mode, we gave it that, which is to say it received the most number of awards, we gave it that. In this case, you can see there's a little asterisk because we have one committee member giving it $510,098, another one, and then one give it $510,000 and 100. So it was a difference of $2. We said that's close enough. That's the mode. The rest of them you can see. I'm sure you've all taken a look at this. But what we did is, after assigning those toggles, that populates the column K, which is in green. That's the key one for everyone to look at. And we just went down the list all the way to the bottom where the cumulative funding exceeds $6,530,000. That's what we're calling the cutoff line. And then we stopped. We didn't make any other allocations beyond that. Everything below this line that's in gray is an application that received fewer than 4 member proposed awards. There was no unanimity on, regarding those applications. So that's the explanation. If I missed anything, Dan, I'm happy to cover it.
That was very good. Thank you. We'll get questions in just a moment. I just want to mention a few more things. This is also part of the public record. Here it is in this meeting. I've already asked that it be further embedded in the public record, either in the minutes or on the website or both. So that is happening. There's also a paper version available here today that the clerks put together, the largest spreadsheet I've ever seen. They had to tape 2 pieces of paper together to get it all in there, but if anybody wants a paper copy, you got it. So yes, that was a good explanation for me. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the process? Shauna.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank MRB. I received the spreadsheet back, and I think I wrote Michael and said, this is a great spreadsheet. And he wrote back and said, I've never in my life heard anyone say a spreadsheet is great. And, but I actually think think that it makes it very clear what our top priorities are, and I think it provided a system for some ranking. And at this point, I mean, it's just great to see things on paper. My belief is that the six of us actually agreed on, probably 10 or 15 of the top highest projects, and it was nice to have consensus on that because I think we could feel really good about that. So good job, MRB. I love the spreadsheet.
Deborah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love the spreadsheet too, because I don't see any other way that we're going to get this money out the door before I'm dead and buried, unless we have some mechanism like this spreadsheet to coordinate and reach some sort of consensus about how we're going to allocate funds. I mean, it's not perfect. There are things I didn't love about it. The final product, nobody's going to be totally happy with it. But it's just not, it's not feasible to spend time debating each and every one of these in person and then having to go through the entire process, not with just 6 of us, but with 14. So I really do appreciate this mechanism for achieving a consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne.
Thank you. So, yeah, this spreadsheet is very, very helpful. One question I have is regarding, Michael, you said, for instance, if 4 members voted full funding, then they would get full funding. That's what they would get, not an average. I assumed or interpreted from our last meeting that it was going to be the average of all of what everybody suggested. So if 6 people suggested an amount, that it would be the average of that, not the, if 4 people voted for full funding. And so I just wanted to ask you about that. Is that a typical way to do this, or how'd you come up with that?
Well, I guess the logic of the consulting team was, if it's almost like this is sort of like mini voting, right? So if we have a majority of people saying, I want to fund this at the full amount, it's almost, I treated it almost like that's the vote, right? And so I didn't want to override the majority opinion with an average in that case. That was my sense.
And anything else?
And I guess I'm just wondering, with the majority, then if, say, 4 wanted to vote the lower amounts, then that would be the same thing, that it went to the lower amount.
That's correct. Great example right here. You can see this application, the Village of Ithaca, application 111. 5 of the committee members voted to provide it the minimum award. So that's an example of a majority vote as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll mull it over. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but it's not what I was thinking as we were going in, but it makes sense. Thank you.
Rich John.
Dan, thank you for letting me visit with your committee for a minute here. I'm watching because, of course, I have my sliced bread grant proposal that didn't get votes, and I was trying to figure out what's the process to try to insert it. But listening to the conversation and the discussion or the description Michael provided, and reading some of your email, Deborah, yours in particular, you guys have done just a staggering amount of work. And I'm reluctant to try to second guess it. And so I'm left wondering, should I even proceed? And I'd love to hear a little bit, Dan, on what you think that process will look like at our legislative meeting. But before you get there, I just finished by saying, when we started talking about this in the summer of 21, we knew it was going to be a complicated project to do this in a comprehensive way. And I want to compliment you all. You've done it. You know, you've really, I mean, people are going to disagree with you all day long, of course, but nobody can say you haven't thought carefully about every one of these proposals. And for that reason, that's why I'm saying I'm reluctant to show up at a legislature meeting and say, let's do it differently. But anyway, what do you envision that looking like at the, I think it's what, the meeting on the 19th or 16th?
The 20th, December 20th.
20th. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Rich, for the nice words for the committee's work. So I believe, I hope, that by the end of this meeting today, we are going to vote on a package of applications to fund and send that to the full legislature for its consideration on December 20th. At that time, it'll be like any other resolution. It'll come to the legislature and it'll get put on the floor, and any legislator can make any amendment they like and debate it. And if they get 8 votes, then that amendment becomes part of the main resolution. If it doesn't, then it gets dropped right there. The asterisk on this one is that anything that anybody wants to insert or delete, we have to take the money part into account. We have a finite amount of money. So if somebody wants to add a project, they have to also explain, as part of the amendment, proposed amendment, how to fund it.
Which means, Dan, that your amendment is going to have an offsetting reduction in some other proposal that's within that resolution among the packages. You're going to have to reduce somebody in order to fund what you're putting forward to substitute, if you will.
I mean, that's how I imagine it, but also if somebody...
There's no other way.
There may be creative ways.
Okay.
Don't underestimate this legislature when it comes to saying yes. But yeah, that is essentially what I imagine too. Yes, you add something, you have to take away from somebody else. Any other questions or comments about the process of how we got here and what's going to happen next in terms of after today's committee meeting?
I just add to it. It's whatever resolution comes out of this group has got to be fairly tight when it goes. And I can remember a chairman of the legislature that would bang the gavel 40 years ago, and the minute you delved into changing the resolution, and he would say, "You're doing committee work," back to committee, and off the floor it would come. And you know, we might have to have some kind of discipline like that if it starts to go off the rails here. I mean, you've got weeks worth of work here, but multiply it from 6 to 14 or 13 people and attempting to go through it again. As Deborah said, we may not live to see those dollars go out the door.
I'm going to jump in for a sec. I see Deborah, I see you. I mean, I kind of agree with that, and I kind of don't. From the beginning, it's been important to me that any legislator does feel like they've had an ability to affect this process. And as we've gone on, I've realized that if you're not, even on this committee, we have very limited ability to actually guide the outcome. And if you're on the full legislature, you have even less ability. But I don't want to make it no ability, all right? I want people to have an honest chance to try to amend. It's a tall hurdle, but you know, it's still there. So, Deborah.
Well, I would hope that the members of the committee at least could agree that whatever we recommend coming out of today's meeting, we will all support on the floor. That would be extremely helpful.
Any other questions or comments about the process before we go on to our next item? Ann.
Yeah, thanks. I do have I don't know if we want to wait till we get to the resolution, but I would prefer to have the ones, any grant awards over 250, and I can't remember the last time I counted them. If the ones in this resolution, I think there's like 5, that we do them the way that we said we were going to do them, and originally, and put them out separately for resolutions to be voted on separately by the legislature.
My feeling at this point is that, first of all, any legislator has the right to pull out any application they want and have a separate vote. So one way to handle that, and because we're sending a full packet, one way to handle that is for you or anybody else to move, I want to pull out this application or this group of applications and have separate votes in them. So that's one way to do it. Another way would be that the legislature itself votes like, this is the process we're going to do, which is maybe the same thing, I'm just saying. But it's already built into the system. Any legislator can pull out any application they want and ask for a vote on it. So in my mind, that gets to the same end. Do you want to say more, Ann?
Well, then I guess if, just thinking it through, then if the legislature votes it as a packet, we voted it as a packet. We're not voting it separately, although you could say the other voting, maybe took care of it on that spreadsheet that came out on the spreadsheet. Okay, I would at least, mull over the idea of maybe I might pull some of them out or all of them out at the legislature meeting, just trying to think about our process. So thanks for, I would imagine I'm probably the only one that thinks that way, but when other people do, feel free to chime in.
It looks like, Ann, you would be talking about 7 separate resolutions by those recommended for over $250,000. If I'm looking at the spreadsheet correctly.
7? There have been 7. That sounds right.
I thought there was 5, but maybe I'm not seeing them all.
On the spreadsheet as it exists right now, I stopped sharing it, but there's actually a total of 8 that fit into that biggest bucket. If that's the slate that you provide the legislature, there would be 8.
Thank you. That's 8. Shauna.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like if we start taking things out of this resolution that we're presenting to the legislature, it starts picking apart the decisions that we've made. And I can look on the list, and out of the 8, I could say, there are 2 that I didn't vote on, but whenever I'm voting on them as a package, I'm pushing them all through, and I'm understanding the fact that, I might not have been in support of 2 of these specific requests, but as a group, we are moving them forward. And I think that if we start separating these into 8 different resolutions, you're going to see this completely open up on the chamber floors. And the work that we will have spent hours and hours and hours on, we could have to start all over, because you could see 3 of those projects or 4 of those projects not be passed for the full legislature. So I would just think about that, because as Deborah mentioned, not everything on this list, we didn't all approve these. As much as we want to give out all the money to all of the projects that we think are the best, this is part of the compromise.
Deborah.
Yeah, again, this is why I really feel that it's important that as a committee, we stand by what our collective recommendation was, because the logistics of filing 8 separate resolutions for the large category of grant, and then figuring out well, if that one doesn't pass and something else gets passed, where's the money going to come from? And how is that going to affect the smaller grants? We're going to be here until 2045. If it's this hard to get it through 6 of us, can you imagine what it would be like if we just threw the whole thing open to 13 of us? You have to decide, do you want the money to get out the door to people who need it and have been waiting for it? Understanding that we're not all going to think it's perfect, and some people are going to be really disappointed. But nobody was entitled to this money, and no one of us is entitled to hold up the whole process because they have a pet project they want to push. This is a collective decision about what our county priorities are and what we want to fund. That's all.
Any last thoughts about this topic before we move on? Okay, the next thing we need to tackle is, or just to understand better, let's say that, is the seeker resolutions. Like I said earlier, I'm slightly fuzzy. I think I got it, but I thought if I'm slightly fuzzy, maybe others are as well. So you'll see that some of these applications come with seeker requirements, and that whenever we do those kinds of projects, we must do a pair of resolutions that go with it. One is to say that the negative declaration from seeker, and the other is then to appropriate the funds for that project. So that's why there's always pairs of these. And that's the easy part. The harder part is that if they're included in the packet that we end up sending up to the full legislature, I'm told we have to pull them out. They can't go as part of the packet. I don't know, Joan, can you help me explain that better? Or Kathy, can you? Or was that good enough explanation?
It was fine.
Well, I will say, one, you have to act on the seeker determination before you can vote, before the legislature can vote on the project. So to that degree, those individual seeker resolutions have to be handled individually. We can't clump them into one big resolution.
The seekers can't be put in one big resolution, the seeker itself, but if we have seekers for everything that's in one resolution that recommends the grants that are covered by the seeker, is that enough, or do we also have to appropriate the funds in separate resolutions? I guess that's the question.
I guess it becomes a consideration if there's anybody that ever challenges the decision about what you were actually voting on when you adopted the full resolution with the funding, whether
well, the seekers would
have to know better than I would. It's so unusual that I've never run across this situation.
It's hard to explain this stuff, hard to understand. Go ahead, Deborah.
Well, I was just going to say, from planning board experience, you have to pass the seeker before you allocate funds. But I don't know necessarily in this particular instance that each fund allocation has to be in a separate resolution if the seekers were all passed before we pass the resolution.
I think the reason we can't do that, we can't pass a seeker on a specific project if we don't know that that project is not in the final, we haven't voted on the final packet yet. We have to do it in that order. That's kind of my understanding.
Well, all I know is the seekers have to be passed first.
Okay. So I also believe we need to subtract, let's just use an example. Let's say when we do our first resolution, which is the packet, if everyone understands what that means, it includes the Coddington Road Community Center. It's just an example. Do we have to subtract the dollar amount of the Coddington Road project from that resolution as we're passing it?
I think you have to protect yourselves. You could have an outfit that says, yes, we'll do this, but you don't make them set aside the money. If you don't have the money, you don't have the work done, that project has to be stopped.
Okay. So I and maybe others are going to need some guidance as we go along to make sure we're doing this exactly right. But I think there's enough people that understand this well to give us that guidance. I have another thing about seeker, but before we go on, is there any questions so far about what we just said about seeker? Okay. Now, Joan, tell me if I'm correct in this. The ones that are listed on today's packet, those seekers are done?
They are, and you should have been provided links to those the full seeker environmental assessment forms and related attachments that were not already part of the application package. We didn't clump all that in together.
Yes, thank you. So those were easy seekers.
Those were available, and I'm sure you read them carefully.
Yes, we did all see them. The reason I brought it up is I'm contrasting it with the one more seeker, the second wind seeker.
That's correct. I'm happy to talk about that when you're ready.
In just a moment. Let me just tee it up for you. So, in the packet here, and potentially funded, potentially in the top 55 or whatever number that is an application for the second wind cottages. That project requires a seeker. That seeker is more complicated. That seeker is not complete. And we have to, well, I'm asking how we're going to treat that one differently, or how that one works. Joan, you want to start us out, or say anything else? Just say you're part of it or whatever.
I'll just say my little piece of it, which is this is a type 1 action. And since it's a type 1 action and we know the town of Newfield will eventually have to approve it, we are required to do a coordinated seeker review. So it's not something we can do internally exclusively. We would need to reach out to the town, determine who's going to be lead agency, and then come to agreement on the entire environmental assessment form and recommendations. I guess I'll leave it at that for now. How you're going to handle it, I'm not 100% sure.
So that is my next question. So if it...
We can't appropriate anything without a seeker. I mean, you could put money aside for it maybe, but...
Yes, you could vote and not include this application, but that doesn't mean it's going to get funding down the road.
So would the process be that we would, if it's the desire of the committee, we're going to pull that application out and pull out the dollar amount that would correspond with it, and that'll kind of be set aside. Is that the correct process?
I would think so.
I would think so. And then you use that money, and there's a deadline put on to get into compliance with seeker, and then they're cut loose to do what they need to do.
So just to confirm, that money would be put in contingent fund with the assumption that we're going to vote on, or we cannot vote on the project until?
Cannot vote on funding the project until the entire seeker review is complete.
You put the money aside, you give them a deadline to do it, and if they don't do it, the money goes back in the pot for some others.
I want to be fair. The applicant has submitted their information. Now the county and the town need to coordinate the review process. So that hasn't started yet because I did not want to start something.
It's a big one.
That we would have to finish if you decided you did not want to fund it.
Yeah, fair enough.
That way.
What is the timeline on seeker? Is there a timeline? A deadline, I guess?
Not really, but I think 60 to 90 days we can probably anticipate for this. I mean, once we say go, which might be today, but that's, assuming nothing that I wouldn't anticipate happens. I wouldn't even want to venture guesses at this point.
Right. Anything can go wrong in that, or wrong, or...
Well, it might...
The process might fail. The project might fail.
It wouldn't fail. We would make environmental determinations, or staff would make a recommendation, or the town of Newfield will make a recommendation, and then you would weigh that versus whether you want to fund the project or not. More for the timeline concern is if something comes up during the early review process, I'm going to pick something that it's not going to be so that I don't have to. Now I'm going to stump myself. Okay. I'm not going to try to say something that might not occur. This might occur. We might need to do a traffic study. That's not going to take 60 to 90 days. So I just want to be, that 60 to 90 days is if nothing major needs to happen. best I can say.
Okay, so we could set the project aside, the seeker will proceed. If the seeker finishes, when the seeker finishes, it'll come back to us in some form, us in some form. And if it's not completed, if something, there's a certain amount of time goes by and any legislator wants to make a motion to reconsider the funding for that, I guess that would be the way it would go.
I'd be happy to give regular reports, not weekly reports, but just let you know where things are, if that'll help you make that, rather than setting a firm deadline. I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
As am I, yeah. Me too. But that's okay.
Do we need a separate resolution for those? I mean,
No, you need to make sure you don't include it in this resolution.
There is no resolution for it because the seeker's not ready.
There's nothing to take action on without seeker being completed, unless, other than to note you need to do seeker. But
Okay, so the stuff's a little clunky. We're going to need all hands on deck, all brains on deck as we get to that part of it to make sure we're doing it right.
One thing
Go
to
ahead,
think
Bill.
about,
Sure.
if one of these projects needs $30,000 worth of work, let's say, to comply with seeker, I'm not comfortable with us advancing the money to them. They have to find money some other way because we have to be able to say, if you don't do this by the time required, we're taking everything back. We're not going to sue you to try to get it back. So no money flows to them until they get the property in order, if you ask me. Otherwise, we're playing with fire.
that would be my recommendation as well, yeah.
Any other questions about seeker before we move on to the next item? Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, I just want to be sure. So I'm trying to look ahead to like having this omnibus resolution that we're going to be discussing. We want to remove all of the things that have seekers attached to them, right?
That's my understanding, along with the dollar figures. But we're going to need to settle what, I think, we need to settle what's on that list and then make our final tweak in terms of the dollar figure. I think that's the correct order to do it in. Okay, we're going to move on from seeker unless anyone else wants to say anything about that. All right. As I mentioned at the beginning, one other decision we'll have to make is what to do, if anything, with calling it the last application, the one that's on the line. As it currently stands, and again, that can change, as it currently stands, that would be the application for the Tompkins County Chamber. I think it's a micro grants one. I can't remember what it is. I only have a couple of words here. They had asked for a high grant amount of $220,000, a low grant amount of $10,000. As it stands right now, we believe we have $16,000 left over. So if we wanted to, when it comes to that moment, we could say we're going to apply $16,000 to that grant. Or we could do something else. But I just want to remind you that once we get into the actual resolution, we'll need to make that final little decision.
And I will, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Not really my business, but
Please.
that application actually included 3 different activities.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to direct that money to one particular of the 3, I would think that would be within your ability to do, rather than expect them to do some portion of all 3 for a relatively small amount compared to their full request.
That's a good point. Remind me of that when we get to, if we get to there, if the line doesn't change it before then. Okay. The next item up is to vote on minutes approval from the last 3 meetings of this committee. Does anybody want to do them separately or together? We can do either one. Somebody want to move some approval of minutes, please? Shauna moves. Which one are you moving, Shauna?
I'll move them together.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second for all together? Veronica, thank you. Any discussion about the minutes? Okay, this is a vote on approving all 3 minutes from all 3 previous meetings. Lee?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Deborah?
Yes.
And Ann?
Yes.
Thank you. So that is unanimous. That was the easiest one all day. Okay. I believe we're up to the resolution to recommend a packet to go to the full legislature. Does everyone feel like we're at that moment? Anything else we need to take care of before we get there?
Okay, but we need to amend that to remove Second Wind Cottages, right?
Well, we haven't even moved anything yet, so stand by. I just want to make sure we're at that moment where someone's going to make a motion. Veronica?
If I have a couple questions or asks for changes on the spreadsheet, should I wait until after someone has moved?
I believe so,
And
yeah.
then we just get into the weeds?
I believe so. That is what Robert's rules say. We might as well try to stick to being as official as we can. Okay, is there anybody that wants to make a motion that would move all the applications to consideration by the full legislature that appear on the merged spreadsheet up to and including Tompkins Cortland Community College application, maybe we'll get an application number on it, and subtracting out the seeker applications. How did I do on that wording? No, we have, wait, hang on a sec, we have a resolution. Sorry, we've already done, Norma has written us a nice resolution.
May I ask a question? Because I
Yes.
can't find Coddington Road on this resolution that Norma wrote up. Am I missing something? It's altogether possible like COVID brain.
No, it's seeker, Deborah. That's a seeker. So the only one that requires seeker that got put on this resolution is
okay.
Second Wind Cottages, because I missed that one, so.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Norma.
Would you
Scratch
repeat
everything.
that?
Oh, go ahead.
Norma, would you repeat what you just said?
Yeah, all of the, Joni and I work together, all of the resolutions that, or all of the projects that required seeker have been removed from that blank, or that bulk resolution, with the exception of Second Wind Cottages, because I kind of missed that one, because it's different. So, but all the other ones have their own resolution. So they're not on that, the list projects. Does that make sense?
And the dollar amount has already been taken into account then, or not? Are we subtracting the dollar amount of the seeker ones?
I didn't add dollar amounts to the resolution, at the top of the resolution, because there are still decisions that are being made, which is why there's some other projects at the bottom, because there are still decisions being made. Yep.
There is no dollar figure in the resolves.
Not yet. Nope.
We're going to have to add those today. And we are going to do that by subtracting the seeker dollar amounts from the total. Does that sound right?
Right.
That sound right,
And
Deborah?
then I guess the other thing we have to decide too is whether we want to give that 16,000 to the chamber.
That's right. We'll get there. Okay. So let me start again. We already have a resolution. Does somebody want to move that resolution that's in our packet? Shauna's going to move it. Deborah's going to second it. Thank you. Discussion. Veronica.
I'll start with my easy question first. One of the ones on it is the Finger Lakes Toy Library, application 265. I think it's row 40 on the spreadsheet. Could we, actually before that, do you think it'd be a good idea to have the spreadsheet on the screen as we talk about it for anyone watching who might not have access to it because it wasn't made public yet? Thanks.
It was made public, and yes, it would be good to have it up there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Where?
okay. It's in the agenda packet.
No, it's.
Well, I see what you're saying, the spreadsheet itself.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yes, and that means, though, that if you're on the screen and need to speak, you should shout out, "Hey, Dan," because I might not see you. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Veronica.
Thanks. So it says, there's a little note here saying that the minimum was $10,000, but back in the application, it does look like the applicant noted a minimum of $4,718, and I'm wondering if someone from MRB could clarify.
Yeah, when I did the initial culling, since the program minimum was $10,000, many of them got listed as a $10,000 minimum to be consistent with that. And as we went through a few of them, or this sheet reflects the actual applicant, it appears to reflect the actual applicant minimum request. But the program minimum is $10,000.
I'm sorry, do you mean that for this program, we agreed that the minimum grant would be $10,000?
That was the legislature's direction at the beginning.
Okay, great. So in that case, My next question is about Ithaca Media Arts, application 341, row 60 on the spreadsheet, where we're recommending giving them $6,000. Is that then an issue? And I apologize for forgetting about this minimum. As you can see, I have allocated lower than $10,000 to some things.
Problems.
I mean, ultimately, it's your funding. I guess would be my comment is that you can allocate funding as you see appropriate. The guidelines do say that there can be changes made without notification to the public. So you have the right to do that. Just know that that was the guideline that was set forth originally.
Good catch, Veronica. I had missed that one. Did you have any other things at this time?
Yeah, I guess I'd want to comment that first of all, thank you for the spreadsheet. It's sorted great. It's helpful, as other people said. I think in the last meeting, well, it was the spreadsheet that we filled out. I described my dream spreadsheet, and you gave it to me, and for that, I'm very grateful. But so in Michael's email about like how to sort it, I think you did mention that we might want to revisit like the last, some of the bits of it, one of them being the sorting within the block of applications that got a certain number of legislators voting to fund it, the number in column H. And so I'm guessing looking at the block where like 4 legislators wanted to fund it or not, because that's where our cutoff line lands. And within that, it looks like things are sorted by the average percent of the ask that we wanted to fund. But I don't, I'm not yet bringing like a specific motion to like change this ordering, but I don't really want to take that as a default, just because I think that the applications down at the bottom are like, yes, the average like legislator desired funding percentage allocated was pretty low, but those applications also had a larger spread between the minimum ask and the overall ask. Whereas like, unsurprisingly, all of the, like looking in the set of things that 4 of us wanted to fund, all 5 that where the minimum ask equaled the full ask, they're all real near the top of the block of 4, because of course they are, because no one was gonna suggest funding less. So I don't want to take the low percentage in column J as a signal of like less support for funding that project at all, even though you have to order the spreadsheet somehow, and so the ordering does take it as less support. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, so there's no motion yet?
Not yet, because I guess if you all say like, that's dumb, then I'll.
Okay, you're reserving your right to make a motion. Other discussion? Well, if there's no other discussion, it means we're about to vote, although we still have to do a few little tweaks. Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't think anybody's going to say that's dumb. I just guess at the end of the day, the issue is how perfect do you want to make this process, knowing that perfection causes time and complication and more debate that probably isn't necessarily going to get us anywhere. I mean, this seemed like the best process or mechanism to reach some kind of consensus with respect to dozens of applications for a wide range of money. Yeah, that's all I got.
Other discussion?
I'm at a cart before the horse type moment, I think.
Sure.
Are we going to have a conversation if for some reason some of these can't be funded or they would get withdrawn? What would be our priority without reopening or going through a total review again? and when would you want to have that speculation, or would we want to just not even touch that?
So that's a good question. I thought about this a lot. I think what you're asking, tell me if I've got this wrong, Lee. I think you're saying, do we create a waiting list?
Right.
Or do we just revisit it in 3 months and see where we're at?
That's exactly what I'm asking, because after, and I'll tell you where I ended up. I got to a point where when I knew the money met these amounts, I stopped pretty much. And unfortunately, as I looked down the list of priorities, I think everybody was kind of aligned with me for the most part as to what the next few could potentially be. And I thought about it, and it's like, I got hung up on the Cayuga Medical one, for instance, and I had asked early on in the process, boy, 1.5 is the minimum, it's the minimum. We funded it there, and I think the vast majority of us were there, but had we had that extra 500,000, I would have loved to have seen the next 2 or 3 on the list get bumped up. And I didn't necessarily rate them because I knew I was at that point. We're going to have the seeker review. There's a potential for a $500,000 project that may not make it in the long run once that conversation gets more broadly developed. And I kind of, if that one weren't there, then, the next couple on the list would have been high on my priority. I just, I don't know if that's the same sense of the other 5 members, but I don't want to foreclose any opportunities, but I would kind of like us locked in that, we've gotten to this point, the ratings are there, they mean something, and I think a waiting list is very much a good way to look forward.
Lee, let me just push you a little bit. So are you suggesting that we say what that waiting list is today as part of this resolution?
I think we have to tell our other colleagues when we get this resolution to the full legislature just what our recommendation would be if we couldn't move forward with what was in front of them. I don't think we want to leave it wide open. I think we want them to be assured that we've thought about that potential to come along.
Shauna.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I think that is very important because we are under a time constraint. And so I think that whether it be 3 months or 6 months and we see that a project's not happening, it would be great for that money to go back into the pot. And I don't know if it would be worthwhile, but maybe MRB can actually reach out to the unfunded agencies, as well as, and I also hear what you're saying in regards to, we might have given the minimum and maybe they should be eligible for more funding. But maybe MRB can reach out via email and say, if you are not awarded a grant funding during this round of grant funding, would you be interested if funds became available in the future? Because, at some point, we would also have to make the decision based on how ready the project is going to be, because the timeline is going to be that much shorter.
So I'm not sure this directly answers what you were saying, and I see Deborah and Ann's hand up. I think we need to hear from MRB for a moment just about what the monitoring process is going forward, because there's been a little discussion, but maybe not at the committee level. I can't remember. So I don't know, Michael, Scott, I'm not sure who wants to speak to that.
I'll take a stab, and Tracy, you let me know if I get anything wrong here. My understanding when the committee originally discussed this a while back was that the intention was to recommend the slate to the legislature, in that if for any reason a project didn't move forward, or for that matter, if the legislature made a change or some other eventuality, that it would go back to the committee for a vote. And so I think, I hesitate recommending a wait list in a ranked order at this point. And here's why. It really depends on what happens. And I'm going to get to your exact question in just a second, Dan, but I would just say, just to point out there, like, if we had an application that was being proposed at funding at 10,000, then the response might be very different than if we have an application being proposed at $500,000, right? And that one doesn't move forward. So just, I would think that we'd almost have to wait until we know what we're dealing with. As far as the process and monitoring and so on like that, our next step would be after, presuming today we come to an agreement and the legislature moves forward on December 20th, we have to start working with the county to draft up contracts, and we'll be in touch with the applicants at that point. We will be asking them to keep us appraised of the status of their various projects as we go through the contracting process. And then once the contracts are concluded and underway, then that's when our official grant administration duties begin. And Scott is leading those up, and we'll have regular reporting in terms of where the projects are at the various steps, and then which projects have requested drawdowns of funds and which ones have been drawn down.
Ann.
Thanks. So I had put my hand out because most of my questions were answered, but just one more, and I don't know if Michael had said this. At what point do you recommend revisiting this? Or I guess maybe that we don't need to answer that right now. You'll just keep us informed, and maybe you'll tell us, hey, at this point, I would, there's X amount of money that doesn't look like it's going to be awarded. I would take a look at it now. So I'm just wondering what you think about that, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. That one, we'd obviously want to convene the committee, right? I have a feeling, my guess is at this point, this is going to happen, right? We have quite a few applications, and it's I think likely that at least one will enter some kind of hiccup where we can't get to contract or they can't execute on their contract. I think that probably the best way to go about it is thinking about it in like a March timeframe, and say, that would be a real good time probably for us to come back. I would anticipate we would have at least an indication at that point if there are applications that are unlikely to move forward. I mean, awarded projects that are unlikely to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Deborah.
Yeah, I'm wondering why we need a wait list or a backup plan specifically, because, we've rank ordered all of these. They've stopped being recorded as a funding recommendation right now because we've reached the $6.53 million cutoff, but there still are ones that we voted on that are rank ordered below that line, not only in the white section, but in the gray section. And I don't know why we wouldn't just revert to those. And you keep moving down the list if somebody higher up cannot perform. Is there something wrong with that analysis?
No, that's where I wanted to go, Deborah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lee. Then you and I are thinking in the same vein.
Bill.
Which doesn't speak well for you.
I have one point of order. I live in the village of Lansing and was the attorney for the village of Lansing. Deb will know what I'm talking about. And on Oak Crest Road, there was a relatively modest proposal for building housing. I think we're in year 13 of that effort. The Romans closed off northern England in about 8 years, barehanded with 2 legions of Romans. So I think we have to be very strict because this is public money, and we have to not let anybody get away with something like that again, and have a recapture clause, which is why I'd like to work with the folks on that agreement that they sign off on.
Well, it is a reimbursement grant, so we're not giving out the money until they've actually done the project or at some percentage of it.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
By the same token, though, if they're dragging their feet and you still have money sitting there, you're not spending it. So there has to be some timeline saying, look, either you get this show on the road within a certain period.
There is an ARPA timeline that we've adopted that we have to use, actually.
But we have to be strict in enforcing it, otherwise you get run over by these guys.
Lee, we have to be strict. You're in charge of that part.
Are you back to calling me the Grinch?
I never called you that, but that's a good
No,
one.
I think Deborah did.
Excuse me, Dan, you have a couple hands up
Yep,
on the
thank
screen.
you. Okay, Scott, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is along those lines with the administration and the reporting and the contract, there should be deadlines and a time frame that we will come back to the legislature and say these projects are not proceeding. So you can take that money and reallocate it before the ARPA deadlines. You don't want to lose any of that money from projects not proceeding. So as part of that contract, working with your attorney, we're going to have to put some dates in there. And then through our quarterly reporting or whenever we file those reports, we will have an update. And if some of those projects are not proceeding, we will have to look at going to them and terminating their contract and reallocating that money so you're not losing money and meeting the deadlines for ARPA.
Thank you, Scott. That's a good point. We forgot that it's, for us, it's use it or lose it as well. We don't want to have that happen. Ann.
Thanks, Dan. And maybe Scott can address this too regarding, I think what we had discussed at one point that for some of the smaller organizations that couldn't float the funds up ahead, that, and I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, that we might be able to help them in some way and not have to always be reimbursed, but maybe I don't have that correct. I wonder if Michael or Scott or anybody else remembers that.
Yes, you are correct. Scott or Michael, if you want to say more, go ahead.
That is correct. We discussed an application process that they could request that you fund them up front, which I think, to me, those applicants will have a different contract because they are going to have to prove work was moving forward. And that'll have to have a drawback clause that's stronger than the other ones, I believe. But that is up to you guys, but that was discussed, yes.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that was clarified.
So let's see, one thing to mention that's part of this discussion is that whoever's chair next year is either going to have to reappoint this committee or assign these duties to some other committee, because there is going to be some follow-up work, not nearly as much as we've been doing. Any other discussions? Okay, so yes, we still have a motion on the floor. We're still discussing it. Any more about the wait list idea, or is that kind of settled?
As far as I'm concerned.
Very good, for me too. Okay, then there needs to be some tweaks to this resolution before we can actually vote on it. So I'm hoping that the mover and the seconder and everybody else will approve. And two things that need to happen are the bottom two applications that are listed on there need to be removed from the resolution. That is Unity House and Smart Start. Unfortunately, that's ugly work. I'm sorry to have to make someone do that. I think Deborah seconded it. I'm friendly with that. Is there anybody that wanted to speak to that point? We're getting there. We're getting there. Just the other two are completely off. Go ahead, Veronica.
I wanted to motion to amend it in a different way that, if it were to pass, would like overrun all this stuff.
Go.
Okay. I want a motion to amend to award $250,000 to the Cuba International Project, the Cooperative Farming and International Community, which is, highlighted there, on the grounds that, so this applies to anything at the bottom of that Smart Start and Unity House. The thing I said before about the ordering, I think like those all have sort of equivalent support for the couple dozen above them. And that also, if we remember in the original scoring sheets, that scored very high. It's located in a rural area. It's like a permanent, sustainable, like farming locally project, which, all these projects are different, but those are, it hits a few areas that some of the wonderful projects we are probably not funding also fall under. And so I'd like to see money go to that. That's my main goal in this motion. So I'm like less attached to the other side of it, which is where to pull money from. But what I am going to couple with that, so what I'm moving is add 250,000 to Cuba International, $0 to the Chamber of Commerce one right above it. I'm trying to go in order. Up for the Coddington Community Center one, drop that down to $320,000. The Bangs ambulance one, just cut that down to 0. And the Finger Lakes Toy Library one that I'd mentioned before, change that to $4,718.
Okay, we have a motion from Veronica. Is there a second? Ann seconds. Further discussion. Shauna.
So I think exactly what we've been talking about for the past, I don't know, hour and 5 minutes is the fact that we were given a really great spreadsheet, that we have consensus, and whenever you start putting one of your priorities, it manipulates everything to the way that we were talking about not doing. We have a system that is fair here, that we voted on, that is, we have calculations, we have math, and I think, again, once you open this up, it becomes a process of favorites, and that's one thing that we promised our community we would not do. So I hope that we stick with the spreadsheet that was provided. I believe that it's fair. I believe that we've had debates on all of these different organizations. We've prioritized. And I do think that we need to have consensus around what we move forward.
Ann.
Thank you. So I don't think we've had very much debate. I've gotten, response from community members. Nobody said we're moving too fast. I'm not trying to slow it down by saying that, but I'm just saying, that I've gotten a lot of feedback. We haven't had enough discussion, and I actually agree with that. So I think opening this up and having more discussion, I would, not want to say shut that down just because we don't want to open it up, and just we're this close to the finish line, so just go ahead. I think, discussing the merits of projects, I don't think we can overdo that. This, as I didn't know Veronica was going to bring this up today, but I actually, agree with the amendment that she brought up. Cuba International was scored, I believe, highest in our original score on its merits, and it does speak to, our diversity issues that I would like us to really, think about. And if those are some of the our values for the county, then this is not only for diversity, for folks with low income, getting people into sustainable farming practices, which, this is a big agricultural area. So as we know, this is helping people of color. It's helping kids get into farming. And it's healthy food, helping, as I know, we've got some emails recently about, farm initiatives, and, it helps people with their diet, which helps with medical issues. So, I mean, I really think this is a great organization. And, which is, I think this is, I don't know if we have another one in our list here, that deals with farming. So being a large agricultural area and food being in it, a huge, major issue for people, I would like us to at least consider it and talk it through, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to the fact that there are many, many really valuable projects that we can't fund because our funding is very limited compared to the amount of need that's evidenced by the number of applications. I would point out now that when you decide that you have a particular project that you want to push, it's going to come at the expense of overriding the consensus of your colleagues as represented on the spreadsheet. You know, I hear what you're saying about the value of this project, Ann, but, you know, the Coddington Road project is all about childcare, and we know how desperately we need that. The Bangs ambulance project is all about emergency services, and we know what a problem that is in our county. You know, I can go on. All of these things are important. Yeah, and you know, I guess we can debate them till kingdom come, but I'm not sure we're going to change minds, and people have already expressed what their priorities are.
Veronica?
I just want to respond to what Shauna said about the consensus. I am not trying to, I guess I am a little bit, for the most part, not trying to like fight the math and what everyone has chosen. But the thing that I don't think, that we haven't talked about except for me, but I don't think we have consensus of, and Michael brought this up in his email, is the sorting by column I, the percentage of the maximum funding, or the percentage of the ask on average the community members wanted to give. I don't think that necessarily lines up with prioritization. I'm not trying to argue I'm not trying to take away funding from the ones that 6 members wanted to fund or 5 members wanted to fund, except for my thing with the dropping below the 10,000 for the toy library, because but I'm happy to get rid of that. And the dropping below 10,000 matches what a lot of us put in our spreadsheets. I'm also not advocating giving any funding to anything down in the gray with 3 or lower, even though, yeah, there's some projects in there that I was very excited about. And if Cuba International had landed there, I would have just let it stay there. What I'm saying is that I think that to specifically only within the applications that 4 of us wanted to fund, I think the ordering is semi-arbitrary, obviously not fully. And so I don't think that within that category where the dividing line is actually an expression of the group consensus, and I do think there's room for debate there. I'm not going to try to argue outside of those bounds.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to give $250,000 to the Cuba application with a subtracting from a series of other applications, Chamber of Commerce, Coddington Road, Bangs, Finger Lakes Toy Library for various amounts. Any last discussion? Okay, so the vote is on the amendment. A yes vote would make it part of the packet. A no vote would keep the package as it is. Let us vote. Ann?
Yes.
Deborah?
No.
Lee?
No.
Veronica?
Yes.
Shauna? No. And I'm a no, so that's defeated 2-4. Okay, we're back to the main motion. We have made a couple of tweaks to it so far, eliminating those last 2 on there. We have one more decision, well, a couple more things to do before we can take that final vote. One is, assuming this stays as it is at this moment, we have the Chamber of Commerce, we have $16,000 left over roughly. Do we want to apply that $16,000 to that application? Would the mover like to make that amendment?
Yes.
Seconder?
Yes.
Is there anybody that thinks that's not a friendly amendment? Norma?
And unless I'm missing something, it seems to me that we are looking at $21,451 to get us to the amount that's in the original resolution, but the folks can, it was more than 16,000. Is there something I'm missing?
Michael, are you able to do this calculation at this moment, or is that a little too much to do live?
No, I did do the calculation, and I'm getting it here. I believe the number that we're targeting is 6.53. Is that correct?
So the resolution is $6,535,344.
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me that number one more time.
Yep.
6 million.
535,344.
Okay, sorry, I must have rounded it in my mind. Okay, so there we go. So it's 21,451 would be the number, right? I'm going to repeat that back. $6,535,344. Is that correct?
Norma has the same number? Beautiful. Math. Yay.
All right, so the number highlighted on the screen right now, $21,451 would be the remainder.
Okay, thank you for that
And
clarification.
so how much is going to this Tompkins Chamber?
1,451.
21,451?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Do we need to allocate that for a specific part of the program?
That's a good question. Just stand by for a sec. So we're just agreeing on the number. The mover and the seconder has called that friendly. Anybody else want to not say it's not friendly and require a
Joan
vote?
pointed out a couple things earlier as to direction that could go. Is this timely to?
Yeah, I think that's what Ann was asking also. Is that what you mean, how we allocate it?
You just have that option since they
Yeah.
had 3 specific programs. It would be, if you had a preference, you could identify it.
Tracy or somebody up on the screen there, could you zoom into that application for us and give us a little detail on what it is that they were intending to use that money for?
Tracy, I can't look at it because I can't change my screen.
Let
so
me
if you
let
could
me give a
handle it.
little, only because it's in your resolution, so
Okay.
it might be, there were 3 parts. There was the Tompkins County Micro Enterprise Grant Program expansion, the Hospitality Workforce Navigator, and the Regional Workforce Recruitment. Although I vaguely remember Tracy saying something in there wasn't eligible for ARPA
One of those
money.
got dropped out.
So part of it got dropped out of the total request because we could not determine what those funds would be used for because they were on the other line and not described. I did last week get an email from Jennifer describing those, and it's primarily marketing and staff support. So that was related to the recruitment effort, and that would all be eligible. Those would all be eligible expenses if you wanted to consider that program.
Jonna.
Yeah, I think there was one program which actually leveraged funding from IURA as well as the Community Foundation. And I think it was the hospitality worker. And there was quite a bit of funds that they were going to be receiving for that. However, I mean, it might actually make sense for us to ask Jennifer where this money would be best used, because I don't know as far as if they don't receive a certain amount, if they can't go forward with that grant, or how that would work.
So I would be comfortable, I'm open to other ideas too, but I would be comfortable with allocating the dollar amount with the understanding that the chamber will have a discussion with anybody we want to appoint, the chair, anybody else, I don't care, to just clarify what that is, and we accept that, whatever that is.
Because there will be a contract, so.
Yes.
It can be specified in the contract if that's what we want.
Right, we can let MRB work with them and not specify, right?
Yeah.
MRB,
Well,
comfortable with that arrangement? Or would you like a little more guidance from us? I got a thumbs up from Michael, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Is the committee comfortable with that, leaving it unspecified at this time? Okay, I'm getting a lot of yeses, so good. We did that one. Then, as far as I know, the last thing we need to do before we take our final vote is to deal with the seeker and come up with a dollar figure. So one of the things that happens is that we need to, I wasn't shushing, I was about to say Shauna. It sounded like shush. One of the things we need to do is remove second wind cottages from this list. So mover, seconder, everybody else, is that an acceptable process for now?
Certainly. Yep.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
No objections?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
We need to have a number that we fit into that fifth whereas. We're presenting our funding recommendations in the amount of X. Should that number be the full $6,535,344, or should it be net of the things that we will be putting into those separate resolutions relating to the seeker projects?
It's net, and that's what we're doing right now. We are removing
Okay.
those dollar figures. And when we're done with that, Deborah, if I did not do what you just asked about, please say so, okay? But I think we're doing the same thing.
All right.
Okay, so first of all, we removed second wind and the appropriate dollar figure. And then the ones that are still on the list, if I'm correct, and if I'm not, speak up, in terms of seeker, are the Coddington application and the Village Grove Nursery School application. Those are the two projects that have seekers attached to them that need to have their dollar amounts removed from the list. Does that sound accurate to anyone that's following? Yeah. Okay, is somebody able to calculate now, based on those three things, removing those two and removing second wind, what our final dollar figure is going to be in this resolution?
Yeah, it's $5,425,246.
5,225,000?
Nope, 425. I've updated the resolution. I'm going to submit it.
Oh.
425,246.
5,425,246. Okay, so if I am correct, we have done all the adjusting that we wanted to and need to do in order to vote on this and pass this resolution. So final call for thoughts, questions, comments. Yep, go ahead, Lee.
Okay, so here's the question. 5,425,246 now goes into the second line of the resolution. I'm trying to look down through, are we?
Sorry, not the second line. It goes into the resolved.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm looking at the whereas versus.
Yeah, the whereas stays the same. It's the resolved.
No, well, the fifth whereas has to include the number Norma just gave us.
I see. Yes,
We're presenting our funding recommendations in that amount.
The fifth whereas, not the second whereas, yeah.
And is it, okay, so given that it ends up in the right place, are we memorializing in some manner, or will the minutes reflect that the ones subject to seeker review remain in the queue for
They have their own
funding?
resolutions.
Okay, so those amounts will go into those, and everything is going to total up to the 6.535 when we're done.
Yeah, the only thing that won't have a resolution, I guess, is
second wind.
Second wind.
is second wind, because the seeker process hasn't started yet.
So right, that money is not going to flow out yet, but we are kind of reserving it. And you're asking if that is understood and recorded, and Kathy says yes.
So really, the summary of where we end up is that out of 6.535, this package of resolutions gets us to a sum number of everything except second wind.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate as I understand it. Yep, everyone, I see lots of nods.
Okay.
Thank you. No,
On the
good. Clarify. Yep. Any other thoughts, comments, clarifications before we take our final vote on this?
I'm
Yes.
going to ask a question, and I don't know if Bill's had a chance to look at this. I'll have to apologize, I didn't look at this resolution before this morning, so I missed it. This resolution has a seeker type 226 at the bottom, when in fact several of the individual items are either not unlisted, my apologies. They are either type 2 or not subject to seeker, and they're different kinds of type 2.
I've not seen this, no.
Okay, so I just wonder, I'm a little uncomfortable calling it all type 226 because some of the individual ones are not. Can we leave it to staff to add a column to the funding column that indicates the seeker type for each application? Am I making myself clear?
I understand what you're saying. Yep.
I think I have an idea. We can add to the seeker action the list of the individual projects and the type 2
That's fine,
and their
yeah.
number, and I'll work with you, and we can add that to the resolution before it goes to the legislature.
Thank you.
That's a good one. Thank you. Thanks for catching it. Any other questions, comments, clarifications, thoughts, poems, prayers, anything?
Let me reiterate, I'll support the resolution going forward, and I think I got an assurance out of everybody that if something can't be funded, we're going to look to the next rankings right down through. We return to it if we have to return to it. Did I hear that out of everybody?
Yeah, I think so. I'm seeing some nods. Just to be clear, that is not cemented in stone. That is not law, right?
Right.
It's an understanding.
But that tends to be an answer that we can assure our colleagues with, that's what our intentions are should something not be able to be funded out of these recommendations. We're going to continue on down the line.
Everyone feel relatively comfortable with that statement? Okay. I see nobody saying no to that. Any other thoughts? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's have a vote. Anne?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Yay. Good job.
Yeah, we are not quite done, though.
That's the easy
No,
stuff.
we're way past the time we would have taken a break. I could not stop us in the middle of that. That didn't make sense. We have some seeker resolutions to pass, and then that should be it for the day. So let's go through those seeker resolutions. The first one is making a negative determination of environmental significance in relation to the resolution for Coddington Road Community Center. Is there somebody that would move that one? Veronica moves, Lee seconds. Thank you. Discussion. Let us have a vote. Shauna?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. I just realized I keep changing the order, and the clerks asked me not to do that. I'm sorry. I don't know what order to use right now. Next resolution up is appropriating funds from the Community Recovery Program for Coddington Road Community Center. Is there somebody that would move that? Deborah moves. Shauna seconds. Okay, are we ready to vote? Shauna?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, the next one down is we're skipping down to Resolution F. Resolution F is making a negative determination of environmental significance in relation to the resolution for Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services Incorporated for the Village Grove Nursery School. Is there somebody that would move that? Anne, would you like to move that one? It's your district.
I'd like to move the next one.
The next one, okay. You want to do this one too? No?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Second, Lee? Thank you. Discussion. All right, let's have a vote. Shauna?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And Deborah?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that's unanimous. Resolution G, resolution appropriating funds from the Community Recovery Program for Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services.
We have to put an amount in. I think it's $200,000 per the spreadsheet.
Did we make the mistake on the earlier resolution? Did we need to have added the dollar amount?
No, because this wasn't included in the earlier resolution, because that didn't include any of these seeker things.
The Coddington one had a dollar amount on it.
That's correct.
Right, but this one doesn't.
Okay, thank you. I totally missed that one. So what is that dollar amount, please?
200,000 per the spreadsheet.
200,000. Okay, so Ann, are you moving that resolution with the 200,000?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Veronica, thank you. Discussion? Okay, let's have a vote. Shauna?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is unanimous. Is there any other business that we need to do today? Okay, just as a reminder, this is going to go to the full legislature December 20th. There could be more debate and more tweaking or not. We'll see. And that concludes today's meeting. I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
And thank you,
Dan.
MRB. You must be really sick of us.
Thank you.
Not at all.
Yes,
Thank you
thanks.
guys all for your kind words.
Thank you, MRB and Dan.
Thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.